It is the most visceral pain a social animal can feel. It isn't the sharp sting of a physical wound, but a slow, cold realization that the map you've used to navigate your reality is a lie. We call it betrayal. It is a fundamental rupture in the social contract, a glitch in the matrix of human connection. But the true mystery isn't that betrayal happens. The mystery is what happens next. Why does the brain, after being set on fire by a breach of trust, often choose to stay in the burning building? Why do we forgive what we ourselves have labeled unforgivable? Welcome to the Echo Principle. Today, we map the architecture of betrayal. To understand this, we must look at a case study from the high-stakes world of Silicon Valley, a betrayal that cost $3 billion and a lifelong friendship. In early 2024, a tech firm named Ethelgard was on the verge of a breakthrough in neural link software. At the center were two men, Elias, the visionary, and Marcus, the strategist. They had been friends since childhood. They shared bank accounts, secrets, and a singular goal. Elias trusted Marcus with the Echo key, the foundational code of their company. But trust, in its biological sense, is an expensive investment. When you trust someone, you aren't just being nice. You are performing a high-risk cognitive shortcut. You are deciding to stop monitoring that person's behavior to save mental energy for other tasks. You are effectively closing your eyes in their presence. Elias closed his eyes. And while they were closed, Marcus sold the Echo key to a rival conglomerate for a private equity stake. He didn't just steal a company, he rewrote the history of their 20-year friendship as a long con. To understand why Elias eventually did the unthinkable, why he chose to reconcile, we have to look at the biology of the social contract. Our brains were not designed for modern cities or global markets. They were forged in small bands of roughly 150 individuals. In those ancient settings, being cast out of the group was a death sentence. Therefore, we evolved a neurochemical reward system for reciprocal altruism. When we engage in a trust-based interaction, the hypothalamus releases oxytocin, the so-called trust hormone. But oxytocin is a bit of a misnomer. Recent research suggests it isn't just a cuddle chemical. It is an information filter. In the presence of high oxytocin, the amygdala, the brain's alarm center, dampens its response to social threats. It literally makes you less sensitive to red flags. This is the biology of this honeymoon phase, not just in romance, but in business partnerships. When Marcus and Elias were building Ethelgard, their brains were in a state of chronic oxytocin saturation. Every shared success reinforced a neural pathway that signaled safety. When you spend 20 years reinforcing a pathway, that pathway becomes a superhighway. It is part of your identity. This brings us to the first pillar of the architecture of betrayal, the sunk cost of identity. When Marcus betrayed Elias, he didn't just take the money. He threatened Elias's entire sense of self. To admit that Marcus was a monster was to admit that Elias had been a fool for 2 decades. The brain hates being a fool more than it hates being a victim. When the betrayal finally broke, when Elias walked into an empty office and found the servers wiped, his brain didn't just process a loss. It went into a state of acute neurobiological crisis. Functional MRI studies show that when we learn our trust has been breached, there is a massive surge of activity in the right anterior insular cortex. This is the same region that processes physical pain and intense disgust. Betrayal is social vomit. The brain perceives a traitor the same way it perceives a poison as something that must be expelled to save the organism. This is betrayal aversion. It is an evolutionary defense mechanism designed to prevent us from being cheated twice. If we were purely logical machines, this would be the end of the story. The insular would fire, the relationship would be severed, and the organism would move on. But Elias didn't move on. He went through a period of betrayal blindness. This is a survival strategy, often seen in children who are mistreated by their caregivers. If the person who is hurting you is also the person you depend on for survival, or, in Elias's case, the only person who knows how to rebuild the company the brain performs at split, it isolates the knowledge of the betrayal from the daily functioning of the relationship. It is a form of cognitive amnesia. Elias started answering Marcus's calls. He started looking for excuses. Maybe Marcus was pressured, he told his lawyers. Maybe there's a B-plot I don't see. This brings us to the most difficult part of the architecture, the cognitive labor of forgiveness. In the popular imagination, forgiveness is a letting go. It sounds like a passive release, a balloon drifting away into the sky. But neuroscience tells a different story. Forgiveness is a high-energy, active cognitive process. It is mental labor. Brain imaging shows that when a person decides to forgive a high-stakes betrayal, they aren't just forgetting. They are utilizing the prefrontal cortex to overregulate the emotional signals coming from the amygdala and the insula. They are literally rewriting the narrative of the trauma in real time. This requires perspective-taking, a process mediated by the temporal parietal junction. To forgive Marcus, Elias had to step out of his own pain and construct a version of Marcus that was still lovable. He had to look for Marcus's own trauma echoes, the childhood neglect Marcus suffered, the pressure Marcus felt to provide for his own family. This is the echo principle in its most complex form. What we see in others exists within us. By finding a reason for Marcus's betrayal, Elias was trying to find a way to keep his own world from shattering. He was using Marcus's humanity as a shield against his own despair. 6 months after the betrayal, Ethelgard was in liquidation, but Marcus and Elias were seen having dinner in San Francisco. The public was outraged. How could he? The echo of the betrayal was still vibrating through the tech world, yet the victim had seemingly silenced it. But look closer at the architecture. Forgiveness isn't reconciliation. You can forgive the person who burned your house down, but that doesn't mean you let them back inside with a pack of matches. Elias's forgiveness was actually a form of relationship detachment. By choosing to understand Marcus's motives, Elias stopped being a victim of Marcus's choices. He took back the power over his own emotional life. The brain forgives the unforgivable because it cannot survive in a state of permanent alarm. Chronic resentment is a poison that increases stress hormones, raises blood pressure, and weakens the immune system. The brain's ultimate goal is always homeostasis, balance. Sometimes, the only way to achieve balance is to build a bridge over the abyss, even if you never intend to cross it again. Life is an echo. Marcus's betrayal sent a ripple through Elias's life that could have lasted decades. It could have turned Elias into a cynical, isolated man, an echo of Marcus's own darkness. But by engaging in the cognitive labor of forgiveness, Elias broke the cycle. He refused to let the betrayal dictate the blueprint of his future relationships. As we close this first map of human behavior, ask yourself, what betrayal are you currently carrying in your backpack? Is the weight of that grudge serving you, or is it simply keeping your nervous system in a state of persistent arousal? Remember, your brain is a master architect. It can rebuild even after the most devastating collapse. But first, you must be willing to look at the ruins. You've been listening to the echo principle. Every behavior is a response. Every choice is an echo. Subscribe to continue the archive. Until next time, watch the shadows.